Hi guys and welcome to Studio Wildlife. If you're new here, my name's Daniel and I thought in this video I'd show you why I like to start with a mess. When I first began painting and drawing, I always liked to start with really precise line work and detail and really map out that drawing as precisely as I could before I started. Throughout this video I'm going to explain why I like to start with a mess and why I don't recommend starting out with those precise drawings as beginners. The main reason is those precise and accurate lines are very hard to do at the start of a piece. When you've got no referencing, when you've got nothing mapped out, putting those lines in the correct place can be quite difficult. So it's always better to start by building up the basic shapes first. This technique can be done in charcoal, pastel, paints, whatever medium that you want. But it's always better to start with that mess rather than use those precise detail lines first. So for the mess that I'm starting with in this video, I'm using both acrylics and charcoal to create that background and basic structure of the gorilla that I'm painting. I actually used leaves from my garden to help add more natural mess and organic structures to the background. I left the studio and headed out into the garden. In the garden I have a few trees where I just picked a couple of leaves from each that I thought would give me some interesting and varied marks. Once I'd picked enough leaves, I headed back into the studio, but not before being greeted by my studio partner. Back to the painting, I literally just applied acrylic paint to the backs of the leaves and then pressed them over the surface of the canvas, leaving imprints and textured patterns of those leaves. And then used a charcoal sock with some charcoal powder to begin mapping out the basic structures and some abstract shapes and marks for my gorilla. I'm not thinking about any of the details at this stage. I'm just thinking about those big structures that I can see. Me and Amber have recently been on a sculpture workshop where I created an owl and Amber created a horse piece, and in this I learned how similar the mediums that I use and the mediums of sculpture are. You're constantly trying to add and take away as you refine the sculpture, which is exactly the same thought process that you need to be using when you're creating drawings like this. Constantly refining those structures and those shapes that you're visualizing. The other thing about starting with lines and a very detailed drawing is it's very easy to get attached to the placement of things. Whereas if you're starting out with a mess, you can get over that mental block of, oh no, something's in the wrong place, I need to fix it, much more easily. Starting out with those detailed lines makes it very difficult to accept if something is in the wrong place. And sometimes, I know I'm guilty of it, I would just ignore those things. Whereas starting with that mess and building that structure from an ugly stage and constantly working on it and constantly refining it, making those changes is much easier and allows you to be much more accurate as well. So at the minute, with my current skill level and the way that I draw and paint, I can only really confidently start with a mess in charcoal. I've always wanted to be one of those painters that can just splash paint over a canvas and build up those structures and those shapes all in one go, rather than starting with that detailed drawing. When I'm painting, I do like to use that detailed drawing purely because my skill level isn't there yet. Whereas when I'm drawing with charcoal, I can quite confidently start with a mess because I know I can push and pull that medium to achieve the look I'm going for. Whereas with paints, I'm really only starting my journey with that medium and I've still got so much to learn. But starting with these messes is so exciting and it's a great way to create dynamic and spontaneous looking pieces. And it is a skill that I would love to be able to transfer to my painting process. When creating pieces like this, it's much more important focusing on that journey, focusing on the process of creating the piece rather than thinking about what that outcome needs to look like. And that is something that I think all beginner artists should get out of their head. You aren't creating to make a finished piece, you're creating because you enjoy the process and you want to have fun. And for me, in my personal opinion, creating pieces like this not using those detail lines, starting with very basic blockings, a messy, ugly structure, creates a much better finished piece. It creates a more 3D, more formful looking piece with a lot more interest. You can see where those marks have been taken away and where those marks have been added. And it's not just a refined piece from the get-go. It's something that you can see has had a lot of time and patience and work put into it. And you can almost see the story of that piece from start to finish. So it's for those reasons why I love to start with a mess. And if you'd like to see how I created this gorilla from start to finish, then why not check out my Patreon channel? And if you've enjoyed this video, why not check out this other video that I have here that follows a pretty similar technique but painting a tiger. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.